suppose we should just start with Double Prelude, really.
Yes.
Seeing as its first outing, is it? Its first outing?
It's a world premiere, yes.
Wow.
Online world premiere.
Online,
this is the new world, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And the very strange thing of talking to each other, sitting meters apart, and trying to make it all feel as natural and normal as possible.
Yeah.
But it's a huge pleasure and privilege for me to be playing this, Luke. So I'd like to ask how it came about, really, that it started as something we talked about ages ago.
Yes.
Beginning of this year. But is it something that originated from that, or does it precede that?
I think it started with our conversation about it, and obviously from March I've had a lot of time to think about it, as some people have, and as soon as you mentioned the idea of these interviews or something, I thought, well, it's a great chance to create something new during these unusual times. And with so few concerts having happened, and obviously the future, when as we record this, we don't know when any kind of concerts will be going ahead in the immediate future. It seemed an opportunity, yes, to at least create a very small but at least something new.
Yeah, and something that marks 2020 as well, because it all originated in lockdown. We're about to return to lockdown. It's something rather sadly, predictable about that. But this is a piece for this year, in a sense, in many ways. It's interesting coming at it. Obviously, it's completely fresh. The sense of sound from silence, but also a huge feeling for me, especially in the second movement, of isolation and very disparate ideas coming together, and something very, I don't want to draw parallels that you haven't intended, but for me anyway, that there's certain things in it that really resonate with 2020 and what's been happening.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way of avoiding that. I wouldn't claim that this piece it's not an attempt to represent everything that's happened this year. I don't think there's any way you can do that. But obviously what we've experienced, what I've experienced, feeds into what we create. So had this piece been written last year, I'm sure it would have been quite different, and again next year equally so. So it's very nice that we, I think I sent this to you in September or something, so it's still fairly recent, but fresh off the page.
Yeah, and what's very nice for me with that as well is actually to have this last opportunity before we go back into lockdown to play it to you and actually talk about it face to face. Because there hasn't been a lot of opportunity to do that, even with those of us who've been lucky enough to go back to playing and doing online concerts or radio things. It doesn't feel very real, yet playing this to you, that is making music as I was used to doing it, and it feels really wonderful and really moving to be able to do that again. Who knows when next?
Well, that's why I wanted to hear it in person, because I haven't heard any of my music played this year. I think that's true, in person, which is a very it's a very strange experience. So it's lovely that we can even in this very small way, we can mark it in some way.
Yeah, for me too.
so I'll talk a bit about I suppose the little bit of history seems a bit of a big word, but the process of composing the piece. So yes, I had this little starting cell that I think the first thing that I wrote was something similar to the opening of the second movement, but I'm a bit hazy about that now. But around the same time, there was another idea that is what eventually became the first movement. This more, I suppose, involving double stops and more harmonic idea than I think of the second movement. It's more melodic in nature. But the hardest point of the piece was kind of I spent a long time trying to see if I could fit these two different approaches, I suppose, into one piece. I'd always imagined it as being a sort of 3 to 4 minute single movement piece.
Yeah.
And for some time I tried different ways of. I tried whether I could move from one into the other, or whether I played around a little bit with this, like an instability idea of cutting between the two different movements, what became the different movements. And then one day I sometimes the obvious is you don't see it straight away. Is that I thought, well, these are actually two different pieces. Although they're connected. And as soon as I thought that, then it was all, everything fell into place really. And it's funny how you have to go through these processes and things to find that out.
Yeah.
But that was the sort of the discovery, the journey of discovery I made in writing this piece.
And they sort of orbit the same cellular material,
Yes.
but offering
Yes, it's like different moons around the same planet or something. I don't
something
know.
like
Yes.
that. Yeah.
But I could never get them to behave together. So that then I thought, well, I'll make them two pieces, and like siblings, but
different points of view.
But different points of view. Yeah.
If you said it so beautifully earlier, which was about the shifting and the displacement of beats and how that's woven into the fabric of these, because I think whether or not that's a conscious theme of your music, it's certainly a theme of this piece.
Yeah, that's something that I think is true of most, if not all, of my music. That there's, I want to avoid, very square and regular music. I want it to. I talk about it being like a written out rubato. That the phrases are always slightly stretching or shrinking, but it's a balance, because I don't want to write music fiendishly complex that you need a maths degree to be able to interpret how to play it. But so as we talked about the first movement, that's mostly in 4/4, but the rhythmic pattern is actually essentially in 3. It's this long, short, long kind of pattern. But it's constantly being stretched around, so sometimes it fits in a bar, sometimes it goes slightly over a bar and slightly under a bar. So I could have written it with constantly changing very weird time signatures.
I'm so glad.
But it would have been a lot more work for you and me if I'd done it that way. So yes, it's that balancing between I suppose some sort of sense of practical, what is practical in performance-wise, and shifting things around. You use the word human, I think, because we still play music with humans by and large, and you need maybe that time to breathe, or just take a split second more on something, or. And I think that's very important. And as you say with Bach, although it may look very square and regular on the page, any person, whether they're a great performer or just me trying to badly play on a piano, you're constantly shifting things around, and the tempo in everything is always moving.
So you haven't heard anything of yours at all this year. How does that feel?
I'm lucky enough that I've had some performances. A chamber opera of mine, Through His Teeth, has been done in Germany, which they first started doing in September, but I haven't been able to go and see it. So they've been, and it's been a great success, and it's gone down very well. Whether I'll ever get to see it, I don't know. And I think they've just gone into lockdown again now, so I think the theatre's now shut again, and who knows what will happen when they reopen. But I think they managed to get 4 performances of it to a small, socially distanced audience. So it was quite strange knowing something that in normal times I'd been there for the first night to hear it and see it and experience it. So it was quite odd to be at home knowing that this was happening.
Sort of remote.
Yes.
Would you normally just go flying for the first night, or would you have some final say in say a dress rehearsal, or how does it work?
Yeah. It might depend partly on timings of things, but if it's possible, I would like to get to at least one rehearsal, to just have a little bit of. But just to hear it, and just partly for my own enjoyment, the selfish reasons, because it's not every day that operas are performed.
No, especially at the moment.
Yeah, and especially at the moment.
No, it seems completely logical to me. Also, I think that maybe they're too. It's too simplifying to say there are 2 different types of composers: the ones who write what they've written and then just kind of let it go, and whatever happens just happens. But with your music, both times I've worked with you, this and with Instability, you've had a lot to say, and not in a nitpicky way, but in a really thoughtful and thought-provoking way.
Oh,
so I remember it from Instability, which is what we played. Huge piece of yours for the BBC Proms in 2015.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
And was it commissioned by the Proms?
It was. Yeah, BBC commission. Yeah.
Yeah. That's an immense piece, epic. I loved it, and I remember your suggestions for that, and I remember thinking how great it was to work with a composer who was really very, very kind of involved in the sound, which sounds like a strange thing to say, because obviously you're all working with sound, but a lot of composers are working with a lot of other ideas maybe, and trying to say and make points and trying to say things in very, very complicated and complex way. A lot of new music seems to be about a lot of other things.
Yes.
And it was really refreshing to work. And I'm not saying that yours is only about sound in the slightest. I'm not. I would never dare. But it was lovely to have that sonic involvement.
Well, I mean, that's always my starting point. Is that for any new piece is the sound world, the sonority. I mean, just the instruments it's written for. I mean, everyone comes with their own baggage and things that they put into a piece. I mean, that's unavoidable. But I suppose my working point is starting from the sounds of things, the harmonies and the rhythms and things, and trying to let that. I mean, that's something I've discovered working over the last, let's say, 20 years. I remember as a student, often you'd start with a piece and you think, it's going to be. You had very set ideas of what it was going to be, and I think that's a good thing to try out. I'm planning about pieces. It's going to do this, or you work out the shape of it before you composed it. But over the years, what I found is that I have to kind of almost let the ideas grow. There's ideally a sort of a natural development of things, that if you try and you start with whatever the seed is, the little idea, if you then try and shoehorn that into a particular shape of something, then the piece doesn't really hold together. It's structurally or in whatever way I feel it's weaker. I mean, I suppose the disadvantage of doing this is that it takes time, because you have to spend time with the material and discover what the best way with any piece is. So it means you can't write as much music as maybe other composers, but I hope that conversely that the music that you do write is stronger as a result of it.
It's surely not about output, more about
Yes.
not content. Surely, no. So you're talking about seed and things germinating.
Yeah.
Well, what was the seed for Double Prelude?
Both the movements are actually based essentially on the same very small idea, and it's very interesting. There was an email sent out where the bark was mentioned as the sort of little bit of the sound well of the almost inevitable the solo violin piece.
Yes.
But in this piece there's a little in well, I'll go back to the beginning basically, that this piece almost marked an end of an obsession of mine. For about 3 years, I basically only listened or played to Bach's music, especially the well-tempered clavier. It drove, especially my wife, mad. I'd try and, I'm not that great a pianist, but I'd try and play it from the piano, and then when I was cooking I might have it, listen to it, and then late at night. So I kind of really lived those pieces, and I can't quite explain what it was at that time about the music that spoke to me, but it was very well. It was a real discovery. I mean, quite a lot of them I'd known from earlier, but I always saw like a rediscovery of this music for me. So in terms of the Double Prelude, for some reason, in the book 1 of the well-tempered clavier, in a B minor prelude, the second bar on the left hand, it's a very precise. I don't know why this. I don't know whether I've just been playing it when I first started playing around with the ideas or something. Something in that. So C sharp, B, A sharp, F sharp, and then B, A natural, G natural, F sharp. So this mixture of harmonic minor and the
All right, just play those notes.
Yeah.
So C sharp.
C sharp, B, A sharp, F sharp for descending. Yeah. And then B, A natural, G natural, F sharp. It's just that little, 2 little phrases of descending things.
Yeah.
And that is the seed of both of these pieces. So, and you hear it especially in the second movement. I think you might even get a sort of quotation of it at one point, or very close to it.
I think yes, bar 12.
Yes.
That's it. Yes.
So it's much clearer in the second movement, because it's.
Yeah.
I mean, rhythmically it's very different, but that's the sort of harmonic seed. And it also applies to the first movement, but it's stretched out in a way, although at the end you do get C, this final little bit C, B flat, A flat, G, which is that same descending sort of minor.
Yeah, you hear it there.
That's about the end of the bit. Yes. Because most of the time it's that first movement that it's stretched so far out that you can't really hear where it's come from.
But now that I look at it on the page, it's absolutely obvious. It's
kind of there all the time.
Yes, it's there all the time. It's like written code throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Wow. I think that's really a fantastic idea of just 3 notes, 4 notes, giving life to 2 whole movements of music. It's exactly how Bach wrote his music, isn't it? It's,
I think so.
Waste not, want not.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the lesson you get from Bach, isn't it? You can't get enough out of even the simplest of material, can you? You can keep generating things. Yeah.
I love the feeling of something blossoming from hardly anything at all. It's a very special thing in music, and I think yes, a lot of times you play a piece where it's had everything thrown at it, the kitchen sink.
Yes.
and you think, well, actually, but what is it really saying?
Yeah.
Whereas with this, one thing I've really loved is it's made me go inwards into what's on the page, because you're not telling the performer to do fancy things or
no.
it's in no way showy. It's in no way sort of trying to be a flashy thing or even something with a sort of program to it, a story to it. I loved its abstractness in that sense, because then immediately my brain is engaged, or my heart is engaged in looking deeper, looking below the surface. When that doesn't happen very often at the moment in my experience of new music. So
that's lovely of you to say.
I've loved that aspect of it, apart from the beauty of the notes, which is self-evident. It's lovely to have that deeper. So the music calls to you in a deeper way, which is a very rare and special thing for me. So with something small, and I know you've written lots of chamber music.
Yeah.
The incredible many-headed nightingale.
Yes,
of number of
different versions.
Different versions of it. Yeah, I know there's some wonderful things, but so it goes from as tiny as this one solo violin, one kind of two movement, perfect little gem, to instability and enormous works like that. Now, does that have the same point of origin for you, really, or is it?
I mean, they're very obviously very different different works, and Instability was, it's a 25-minute piece for large orchestra, including the alcohol organ, and I suppose I start out trying to discover what the piece is. Trying to find out what is the material I want to use. Instability isn't just based on one thing. There's various different, I suppose, seeds, if you want to use that phrase. And Instability was an attempt. Also, what I was attempting to do was, I suppose, the opposite of this piece. This piece is everything grows quite naturally and develops. There's no sudden jumps or jarring changes and things, whereas Instability was very much an attempt. I actually wrote an initial short, piano score version of it, which I then went round and almost chopped up and rearranged it so that some places it almost didn't make sense. That was kind of a deliberate attempt to
undermine.
Which is something I hadn't done before. It was quite nice to challenge yourself sometimes and do things like that to push yourself and make you think of things in different ways. So yes, you might have 30 seconds of one idea, and then suddenly something else would come in and banish that, and then then you'd be suddenly in some other world. But that's easier to. I think that's easier to do in an orchestral piece when you've got so many colours and a variety of sound. With a solo instrument, you could do it, but I think it'd be harder.
Yes, and there is a limit, especially on the violin. You're limited by the pitch range for starters. There really is. I think that's where composers start throwing, fancy fireworks around, and actually.
Yeah,
there's a lot of that already, and no need to add to the pile of.
And I think that's true of quite a lot of chamber music. I think that the strength of chamber music is the small scale nature of it. That about the conversation of chamber music and that sort of thing. If you try and throw too many big effects in and things, it's never going to have the power of a large orchestra or something. I think you have to adapt to what you're writing. From a very early age, I always wanted to hit drums or play instruments of some kind. My family, I'm not a musical family, so it took quite a lot of persuasion that I should have some instruments. So, I didn't start. I started on the guitar. I started learning with my brother's friend, and then then moved on to classical guitar lessons. I think I was about 11 or 12 when I started piano lessons. But I don't know if it's because I hadn't started earlier or for whatever reason, but I never got as technically good on instruments as I should have done because I was spending so much time trying to write music. So my first instinct was always to try and create my own versions of terrible versions of the pieces I was playing or things I'd heard. But that's how you begin anything, isn't it?
Yeah.
You try and do versions of the things you love, and you get them wrong. But then you find there's something interesting in that, and then eventually becomes your own music. I hope.
Would you say that you had a vision or a voice even then, aged 12?
I don't know if I'd say that at that point. Especially when I was about 13 or 14, I was writing lots of music, but each week it would change style enormously depending on what I'd heard that week. But I think that's such an exciting phase to go through. So you're discovering pieces. I remember I have a very clear memory of the first time I heard The Rite of Spring. And I was just, I'd never heard anything like it. And then, I listened to Radio 3 a lot. I would record, I'd go to the library, and it was just, you just try and get as much music into you as you could. I didn't know what I was really going to write at that point, but it was fun. It was really fun finding out.
Exactly, the journey.
Yeah.
But also having those very open ears and obviously very open mind to absorb lots of influences. What would you say? It's a dreadful question to ask of who or what has influenced you most. But what name some of your influences?
When I wrote Instability, I was listening to a lot of Gerard Griset, this kind of spectralist French composers. You're right. So people, they wrote a lot of pieces based on the harmonic series, and there's lots of microtones, the notes you get, which you can play on the violin, which aren't between the notes on the canon, essentially. Things based on harmonics. But at other times, when I was 16, I think for about a year, I only listened really to music of Mark Anthony Turnage. He was a huge influence on my teenage years. And then in my early 20s, Ligeti was a huge figure. He's a really important composer.
Yes.
So, you have phases of things. And I've just come out of a sort of Bach phase, and I don't know where I am at the moment. I'm just enjoying listening
to go forward in time or backwards?
I don't know. Yes.
And what about other influences, non-musical influences? Any of those to
that sort of depends. A piece like Instability, I had been kind of reading about, I suppose, various, political things, people deliberately, trying to, cause instability. That was sort of the thinking of the piece. And as it turned out, in 2015, it was quite.
Oh yes! My word!
It's interesting how things have turned out. So that's it should be the piece for our times, really, these days.
Oh yeah. Still ongoing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, and probably increasingly so.
Did you know it would be some sort of prediction of the future?
I wish I could say yes.
Well, you get a feel for the zeitgeist.
Yeah,
there's a definite.
I wish I could exactly remember what it was I'd read that made me think specifically about things being messed up and chaos being deliberately sought out. But yes, that does seem to be the way the world has gone.
Yeah. I have a few music friends who seem to have the really uncanny ability to predict politics and the future. So I just wondered if you.
I'm afraid that's as far as I can go at the moment.
No, you were really young when you're still really young, but you were even younger when you were composer in residence at the Wigmore Hall.
Yeah.
Now that's something that interests me because obviously the Wigmore Hall's been very good at keeping concerts going and broadcasts and all sorts of things during lockdown, which must be a lovely thing for you to see, having had a working relationship with them. But what did it entail?
There were several commissions, chamber music pieces that I wrote as part of that. There was some work with a few education projects, so they were writing some pieces for like free instrumentation or and things that people took into schools and that sort of side of things, because the Wigmore do a lot of education projects that people outside of too close to the Wigmore may not know about it, but they do a lot of work with schools and things around London. And I mean, one of the really plus points was that I could basically choose which concerts I went to. So I remember seeing Mark Padmore doing Schubert cycles and things, really stunning things, and so many string quartets. It was a real education. I probably didn't know as much about chamber music as I should have done before I had this chance, but I certainly learned a lot more having done that.
Yeah. With chamber music, what's it like when you present your finished article to a string quartet versus presenting it to an orchestra? What's the difference in your...
Well, I suppose with an orchestra you're normally going through the conductor, so everything goes through him or her, and whereas with the chamber group it tends to be more of a all-round conversation. You can't really have with 90 musicians on the stage. It doesn't really work. Sometimes in rehearsals you run around to the percussion and have a little word with them, or the brass, or whoever it is. But often the conductor is like the loudspeaker, the conduit, yes, the projecting passes. It's one of the strange things I find about being a composer is that to talk about instability again. I spent 9 months or a year writing that piece, and I was essentially on my own working on it. So you can be quite isolated, and then one day you're suddenly thrown in front of 90 musicians who are playing this piece that you've only ever had in your head, and suddenly it's that change. That's always the strangest moment I find, is when it's something that's been in here for so long and then suddenly it's outside and coming in, and it's adapting to that is often quite odd.
I can't even imagine how strange that must be. There's already such a discrepancy between what I think I sound like and what I actually sound like. So just on a personal level, if you expand that to 90 and your own imagination. So are you somebody who do you listen back to things on Sibelius or one of the various ways that you can kind of listen back with a fake orchestra? Would you ever do that or not really?
I do as a sort of... It's quite useful for proofreading, that sort of thing. For spotting mistakes and things that you don't always get everything, and especially with larger forces. But I don't like, and I think it's a danger that, when I do occasional little bits of teaching with students and things, I think it's a real danger that you start writing pieces that sound good on the computer, but that aren't written for real instruments. And I think that's something you have to be careful of. I mean, I was in some senses lucky. I don't know if lucky is the right word, but when I was as a student learning composition and things, I think I was 22 or something when I got my first computer. So everything up to then, you had to write out by hand. I remember writing out all the parts. It was just, an enormous amount of work to get anything performed. I mean, it's hard to imagine now because you can
press a button.
You press a button and it prints. I mean, there's still some work to be done tidying scores up, but you can, in theory, yes. I mean, I think there's a slight the loss of handwritten scores and parts. I mean, it means that they're more readable now because some people's handwriting is atrocious.
Yeah.
Mine could always be neater. But it's lovely looking at handwritten scores, and you really get a sense of the character of the music.
And you mentioned earlier on when we were just talking things coming up in 2021.
Yes.
With London Sinfonietta.
Yes. So. I mean, I really don't know what form this piece will be performed in, or if at all, but it's meant to be done in January 2021. It's a song cycle it's only 6 players, quite small, and that was kind of deliberately fashioned in that way, which hopefully will be to our advantage. And these days it's easy to get smaller things done. But it's written for Mark Padmore, and I'm very pleased that he's able to do it, and hopefully we'll be able to do it in January. And it's 5 songs that, well, what do they do? I mean, in some ways they deal with what the past can tell us, what we can learn from the past. The first text, and that was really the starting point, it actually comes from an essay on Shakespeare by Stephen Greenblatt. It's quite famous in English literary circles. It starts with the sentence, "I began with the desire to speak with the dead." And there was something I found very appealing about and this text. And I suppose there's some lines from Petrarch, there's one line from James Joyce from Ulysses, there's an Italian poet, and then at the end, a very short text that I basically assembled from Shakespeare, which is, in a funny way, the starting point, and then it comes back to that. And especially the Petrarch text, which he wrote in the 1300s or something. But it's a beautiful poem. Well, he wrote it as a letter, but obviously he wrote it in Latin as a poem, which is what people did if you got medieval. Basically talking about how his books take him to every century and every land. How learning and culture open up new worlds for you. But also about the fragility of these things. About how he talks about how he's looking forward to when the clouds are gone and when the muses rule again. And I think that's something that, especially at the moment, is very, very potent.
I can just say how really extremely glad I am to be sitting here with you talking about your music, and that it would have always meant a lot, but it means something completely different in 2020. And that is very precious and very moving. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much thank you for all your work into this piece.
We're keen to discover what you enjoy about these episodes and how we might build on this venture. We'd be delighted if you made a comment on the YouTube or Vimeo page where you're watching this, or go to the Music Room page of the Shropshire Music Trust website to tell us what you think. Thank you for watching.